When one city goes to sleep, another is already waking up. Across the world, capital, information, and market decisions continue to move, and cryptocurrency markets operate around the clock. In an always-on market, every login, every order, and every asset transfer depends on the infrastructure operating behind the screen. Speed can be experienced in seconds. Trust takes much longer to build. For most users, a trading platform can appear surprisingly simple. Prices update, orders are placed, and assets move between accounts. But every one of those actions relies on a much larger system. Orders have to be processed correctly. Accounts have to be protected. Risk has to be monitored. And critical services have to remain available when markets become unpredictable. That is one of the reasons we decided to take a closer look at Anmrex Exchange. As we researched the platform, 4 areas consistently stood out: security, trading infrastructure, risk control, and transparency. Rather than treating these as isolated features, Anmrex appears to approach them as connected parts of the same operating framework, where technology, procedures, permissions, and risk controls work together over time. One of the first areas we looked at was the trading infrastructure itself. What users see is the completed trade, but what happens before that is far more complex. An order may need to pass through validation, risk checks, matching, confirmation, and data recording before the process is complete, with every stage balancing speed, accuracy, and continuity. The architecture described in our research separates different services while allowing them to operate together under a coordinated framework. The idea is to prevent a problem in one area from affecting the entire platform. Real-time monitoring, capacity management, system redundancy, and failover mechanisms are all part of that broader approach to keeping critical services available when market conditions or transaction volumes change. For any cryptocurrency exchange, another major question is how digital assets and private keys are protected. This is where the structure behind asset custody becomes particularly important. In our research into Anmrex, we found a layered asset management approach built around cold, warm, and hot wallet environments, each serving a different role within the platform. The underlying idea is to avoid keeping more assets online than necessary for normal platform activity, while longer-term storage remains separated from continuously connected systems. We also found references to technologies and controls, including multi-party computation, key sharding, multi-signature authorization, and hardware security modules, all designed to reduce dependence on a single point of control. For significant asset movements, multiple permissions, security checks, and approval steps can add further protection. The objective is not simply to store assets, but to control how access and authorization are managed. Protecting assets is only one part of the equation. Account security matters just as much, because an unusual login, an unfamiliar device, or a sudden change in behavior can be an early indication of risk. Our research found that Anmrex uses a layered account security model involving multi-factor authentication, device recognition, additional verification for sensitive actions, and abnormal behavior monitoring. The broader approach follows a zero-trust principle. In simple terms, one successful login does not mean every action that follows should automatically be considered safe. Instead, risk can continue to be evaluated as the session progresses, allowing the system to respond when the device, behavior, operation type, or surrounding conditions begin to change. Not every risk starts with something obvious. Sometimes it is a change in transaction behavior, an unusual movement of funds, or several minor signals that become more meaningful when viewed together. Another area that stood out in our research was Anmrex's focus on ongoing risk monitoring across account activity, trading patterns, and blockchain-based fund movements. The framework we examined is designed to identify potential anomalies, classify them according to risk level, and move cases requiring additional judgment into further review. The goal is not to interrupt every unusual action. Effective risk management should allow normal activity to continue while identifying meaningful risks early enough for the platform to respond. The regulatory environment around digital assets also continues to evolve. For users, the important question is not simply whether a platform can display regulatory terminology, but whether compliance is reflected in everyday operations. In looking at Anmrex, we found an emphasis on identity verification, anti-money laundering controls, user risk classification, abnormal activity review, data protection, access management, and internal oversight. Different users, services, and risk conditions can require different levels of verification and control. That is what makes compliance an ongoing operating process, rather than a document completed once and forgotten. Security and compliance can also be difficult for users to evaluate if everything happens behind closed doors. That is why transparency deserves its own place in the discussion. Our research into Anmrex found a governance framework centered on areas such as reserve verification, operational records, internal review, independent assessment, and periodic disclosure. The principle is important. Users do not need access to sensitive security information, but they do need enough information to understand how important processes are structured and how key actions can be reviewed. Transparency is not about revealing everything. It is about making important processes and claims easier to understand and, where possible, easier to examine without compromising privacy or security. There is another point that is easy to overlook. Advanced infrastructure should not make a platform harder to use. Ideally, most of that complexity should remain behind the interface. From trading and asset management to account protection and user support, the real value of infrastructure is not how complicated it appears. It is how reliably and consistently it works for the user. When we step back and look across these areas together, a clearer picture begins to emerge. Anmrex places considerable emphasis on the systems and controls operating behind the trading experience. Asset protection, account security, transaction monitoring, risk controls, compliance processes, and operational transparency may not always be the most visible parts of an exchange, but they can become especially important when markets are volatile or something unexpected happens. No cryptocurrency exchange can eliminate risk, and security should never be treated as an absolute guarantee. But that does not make the underlying systems any less important when evaluating a platform. For users who place particular importance on asset protection, account security, risk management, operational reliability, and transparency, Anmrex is a platform worth taking a closer look at. What stood out to us was not one individual feature, but the way these different layers appear to work toward the same broader objective, creating a trading environment designed with long-term reliability in mind. As the digital asset market continues to evolve, those foundations may ultimately matter just as much as the products users see on the screen. Anmrex Exchange is a platform worth exploring for anyone looking beyond the surface of crypto trading.